Hey guys, it's Jane. I'm here to do a quick book talk about Michael Chabon's Moonglow. You may have come across the name Michael Chabon. He has written a number of things over the past 20 years or so, and one or two of them kind of cross over into spec fic. So a really famous one, probably his most famous book, is The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, and that has shades of speculative fiction. The Yiddish Policeman's Union is a straight out alternate history kind of total spec fic story, and it's probably actually my personal favorite. So even if you only read SFF, you may well have come across his name, but he's most famous for literary fiction, and this book is straight out literary fiction, but you shouldn't let that put you off if you don't read much straight lit fic, because he writes beautifully, and this is a fantastic story. It even has rocket ships in it, so for all those SF buffs, it's got something for you. It is a story about a man, Michael Chabon, who is listening to his grandfather tell stories about his life on his deathbed. So basically, his grandfather was a young man during the Second World War. He went through all of that business. He had a very interesting life, not to put it too bluntly. I never really talked about himself, as many people of that generation want to do. But then in the last days of his life, he was on pretty strong pain meds, and told these stories to his grandson, who was just staying, keeping him company. Now, there are all sorts of disclaimers across the book that suggest that this is not necessarily a true story, or you know, elements of it are fictionalized, possibly large elements of it are fictionalized, but that's fine because it is a fantastic rollicking story. The grandfather is an amazing character. He gets up to so much. He's really clever, too clever really, and is constantly getting himself in trouble because he's bored. So he nearly gets thrown out of basic training when he applies to the army as a very young man, by getting up to, you know, hijinks with a friend, but instead gets recruited to OSS, which is the forerunner of the CIA, and then has some really interesting times in training. And then during the war, he wasn't actually like at the front, but he was trying to, his main task during the war was trying to find and recruit German scientists to get them to join, come over to America, not to go to the Russians. And the scientists involved in the rocket program were his key interest. There's just fantastic stories of things that happened during the war, and then after the war, in the immediate aftermath of the war, he's pretty much a lost soul, but he meets a woman, the woman who ends up being Michael Chabon's grandmother, and she is another truly amazing character. She had terrible things happen to her in her early life and during the war. When Michael's grandfather meets her, she is a widow with a young child in America, and yeah, he sees her and just love at first sight, completely overtaken with her, but she is not an easy woman to live with. And a lot of the rest of the story is formed by Michael's grandmother trying to take care of his mother, and her ending up in psychiatric institutions. At one point she decided she was going to join a convent. Another point she nearly burnt down their house. He has got a big temper and never took it out on his family, but when things were tight with his family, he sometimes got into trouble elsewhere. He ends up in prison for a while, and during the time that he's in prison, his wife is hospitalized, and so their teenage daughter has to go and stay with his ne'er-do-well younger brother, who's like a con man, card sharp, billiards hall type dude, and that's all pretty stressful. And there's just all these wonderful stories one after another, and he has a beautiful way of telling them. Then his wife dies, the grandfather's wife dies relatively young, and so then we have this whole other chapter of his life after his wife has passed. So the over kind of arching themes of the story are his pursuit of his wife and his relationship there, the grandfather's wife, rocketry, and particularly his kind of nemesis Werner von Braun and their kind of interactions. And I'm going to read you just a taste. This is a conversation that happens between Michael and his grandfather, right smack bang in the middle of the book. And I think that it, although it's actually a little bit out of character with the rest of the book, because most of the rest of the book is just story after story after story, not necessarily in chronological order. Things kind of weave in and out. But this kind of gives you like the center of what's going on in the story. And this conversation really stayed with me. So I'm going to share it with you now, and I hope that it might encourage you to go out and pick up the book and just listen to the grandfather, because it's the grandfather rather than Michael the author who's really the hero of the piece. "I'm talking too much," he said after a while. "I'm sorry, we can stop. You should rest. Rest your voice." He made a face, dismissing the suggestion. He was not talking more than he had voice or strength to handle. He was talking more than he believed to be wise or suitable. Since, in his view, he reached the limit of conversational daring at the end of a 3-minute Jeremiad on the world's failure to recognise the superiority of the Wankel rotary engine, I didn't take this admonishment or self-admonishment too seriously. I felt like it was, if anything, a tad melodramatic. "I'm glad you're talking," I said. Melodrama was all right with me. "That's just why I shouldn't be." "What? Why?" "You're too glad." "I'm too glad? Too interested?" "Oh no, I'm bored out of my skull," I said. "Really, I'm just being polite." "You think this explains everything," my grandfather said. He weighted the word "explains" with as much contempt as it would bear before exiling it from his mouth. "Me and your grandmother, your mother, my time in prison, the war." He turned from the window. In his eyes, through the haze of hydromorphone, I saw a flash of something I took, based on the historical record, for anger. "You think it explains you." "Explains a lot," I said. "Explains nothing." "Well, explains a little. It's just names and dates and places." "Okay." "It doesn't add up to anything. Take my word for it. It doesn't mean anything." "I get it," I said. "Oh, you get it. What do you get?" "I get that you're a big old effing nihilist." That raised a smile. He kept on looking at me without speaking. But whatever had blazed out through the cloud cover was gone. A tear rolled down his cheek, and he turned his face to the window again. I got up and pulled a Kleenex from the box. I started to try to wipe away the tear, but he pushed my hand aside. He took the Kleenex. "I'm ashamed," he said. "Grandpa, I'm disappointed in myself, in my life, all my life, everything I tried. I only got halfway there. You try to take advantage of the time you have. That's what they tell you to do. But when you're old, you look back and you see all you did with all that time is wasted. All you have is a story of things you never started or couldn't finish. Things you fought with all your heart to build that didn't last, or fought with all your heart to get rid of that are all still around. I'm ashamed of myself." "I'm not ashamed of you," I said. "I'm proud." He made another face. This one said that what I knew about shame, what my entire generation, with its deployment of confession as a tool for self-aggrandizement, knew about shame, would fit into half a pistachio shell. Anyway, it's a pretty good story, I said. You have to admit. Yeah? He crumpled up the Kleenex, having dispatched the solitary tear. You can have it. I'm giving it to you. After I'm gone, write it down. Explain everything. Make it mean something. Use a lot of those fancy metaphors of yours. Put the whole thing in proper chronological order, not like the mishmash I'm telling you. Start with the night I was born, March the 2nd, 1915. There was a lunar eclipse that night. You know what that is? When the Earth's shadow falls across the moon. Very significant, I'm sure. A perfect metaphor for something. Start with that. It's kind of trite, I said. He threw the Kleenex at my head. It bounced off my cheek and fell on the floor. I bent to pick it up. Somewhere in its fibres it held what may have been the last tear my grandfather ever shed. Out of respect for his insistence on the meaninglessness of life, his, everyone's, I threw it into the wastebasket by the door. Okay, that's it for me today. I hope you're all well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!